Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, everyone. My name is Cynthia Ryan. I am the Executive Director of the Vestibular Disorders Association, and I want to thank you for joining us for our webinar on spirituality and gratefulness for living with chronic illness. I'd like to thank Mary Ziegler, one of our presenters today, for suggesting this topic, and Ann Curlin, our other presenter, for sharing her experience and her expertise. No matter what your spiritual philosophy and practice, I think today's presentation will benefit you. During challenging times in our lives, most of us reach for hope through inner reflection, from our relationships, or from a higher power. Developing a practice of consciously cultivating faith and gratefulness can be deeply healing. So before we get started, I just want to mention a couple of housekeeping tips. As attendees, you're logged in listen-only mode, which means that you're automatically muted. However, you can use the questions box to ask questions of the presenters, and I will review these and we'll try to get to as many as possible at the end of the presentation. If you're having a technical difficulty, please try logging out first and logging back in, and you can use the chat area to ask logistical type questions. And even if you're listening on your phone, I encourage you to log in on your computer if you can, so that you can participate in our poll questions. There's also a handouts area. There are 5 handouts that we think could be useful to you, including a copy of this presentation. And the presentation will be recorded so that you can watch it and share it later on as well. So, and also after the presentation, please take time to participate in our survey. Let us know how we did and if you have any suggestions for future webinars. With that, I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to Ann. Ann?
Well, thank you, Cynthia. Well, welcome to our talk on spirituality and health, sponsored by VITA. I'm Ann Curlin, Associate Professor of Counseling at Luther Rice College and Seminary. My late husband, Jerry, suffered from gentamicin-induced vestibular problems for many years. And I'm here with Mary Ziegler, a retired speech-language therapist and also a vestibular patient. Both of us have health concerns of our own and also loved ones with serious health problems. And out of necessity, we became interested in learning how to deal with illness in ways that helped us feel we're contributing to our own well-being. These spiritual practices complement medical interventions because our goal was a well-rounded approach to the best health possible. So no matter what kind of spirituality or religious beliefs people hold, there are some common practices among all of us. Many of them have been studied and researched by scientists who are interested in learning whether such ancient practices could actually be measured as beneficial. And not surprisingly, they found that they do indeed help not only our spirits and our minds, but also our bodies and even our physical health. Bringing peace is the goal of many spiritual practices, and we've learned that a peaceful mind and a peaceful spirit help to promote a peaceful and better functioning body. Mary?
Sorry for the pause. This quote from Dina Metzger is the absolute truest thing I've found in my 20-year journey with illness. A sacred illness is one that educates us and alters us and gives us knowledge. Even if we don't know what sacred means, this is true. While you think about this quote, I'd just like to say that when I was reviewing our presentation, I realized that some people might feel like we were jumping to a solution without acknowledging a problem. I have a generous husband, 4 wonderful children, and 4 fascinating grandchildren, so I am grateful. But I've had Meniere's disease for 20 years, and I certainly understand the misery and loss that comes with chronic illness. I've been unable to work for some time, and I love my job. I have missed many events I wanted to hear or see at local institutions, And most importantly, I miss almost any party in the evening. I come from a family that has a lot of parties. I'm completely deaf in one ear and beginning to lose my hearing in another. I have spinning vertigo quite frequently and less violent but disabling form of vertigo almost every day. 20 years of having a chronic illness has taught me a lot. So I have an idea of what we are all going through. I have been able to build a spiritual practice that allows me to dwell in joy and gratitude, even though there are many days I feel awful, many things I miss, many things I can't always do, and many plans that probably won't ever come to fruition. I really am happy and I really feel lucky. I hope our presentation today helps you, and I'd like to say a special hello to my friends in Canada, even though I've lived my whole life within 8 miles of my birthplace in Chicago. I did go to graduate from University of St. Michael's College of University of Toronto. So I have a special affection for our Canadian members. Anne?
I think we're having some technical difficulties with our mute, but let me see if we can get Anne unmuted. Anne? Well, the mute there is not working.
Is that better?
Yes. Okay.
I'm sorry. Hopefully I'll do better. So living with a chronic illness is a journey, not an event. And Joseph Campbell wrote that we have to be willing to let go of the life we had planned so we can find the life that's waiting for us. And I also have a chronic illness I've had since I'm 15, although it wasn't balance related. This is personal to my life as well. All right, back to Mary.
On your journey, you must let go of many things. So I'll have to say that letting go is one of the two hardest things for me to do. I'm an oldest child, oldest girl, and a kind of a type A personality, or I used to be. And I had to find out for myself that I wasn't always perfect and always right. And for 45 years, I was convinced I was always perfect and always right. So I was quite shocked to discover this was untrue. I had to let go of things I was able to do, things I had planned. Some of the ways I defined myself were gone. So what's the answer to that is to find a new pathway, a new journey, new ways, new goals for things to do, new ways to define ourselves. Sometimes we do that and then we get sicker again and we have to start the process over. Anne, on to you.
Well, on our journey, there will be some things that we need to seek out. We'll need some supportive people. And these might be old friends or maybe new ones. Family, maybe a religious community, maybe a discussion group at the library, and maybe a support group specific to our illnesses. Maybe even a diet group to encourage us. And we need a medical team that we can trust to work with and engage in good health practices. And healthy spirituality means deliberately seeking to live a life of purpose despite the limitations or changes we have to learn to accept. Mary?
There are many challenging and frightening things about the road to diagnosis with invisible disorders. I'm lucky enough to be a language pathologist, so when I first woke up with spinning vertigo, actually it happened that I noticed it while I was in the shower, and then I had to crawl back to my bedroom wet. I figured, something's wrong with my ears, but most people wouldn't figure that. So first of all, it's something that you completely don't understand. And the pathway to diagnosis is lengthy and scary. Your friends and your family don't know what you're going through. They probably think you're being demanding or talking too much about yourself or a little crazy. Doctors sometimes think you are hypochondriac, you really need to keep searching until you find a good doctor that understands vestibular disorders. The VITA website has doctors listed, and so if you just find the doctor that's closest to you and call him or her and make an appointment with them or ask them for a local recommendation. You start questioning your sanity. You know, this couldn't be happening. I used to see things like a mouse running level across the house at eye level, and I was pretty sure there weren't mice running at eye level. You can't do things you used to be able to do. You feel very isolated and alone, especially when you're young, I think, because no one else is experiencing an illness like this. You definitely might experience anxiety or depression, and you may lose your sense of self. I think when you're dealing with your family, the best thing to do is to use very concrete words. So I know initially I said things like, oh, those flashlights bother me. That music is too loud and it bothers me. So use concrete words like, this is making me very ill. This is giving me vertigo. And even if it's not polite, this might make me throw up. So you have to really describe how you're feeling for your family, what's happening to you. Anne?
Thank you. And I'd like to add, with my husband's situation, I couldn't imagine some of the things that he was dealing with. And so those concrete terms helped me gain more appreciation for his struggles. But there are some gifts with having a chronic illness if we look for them. We can develop more empathy for other people. We will become more humble. We will adapt to a slower pace of life. And if we're going to find any joy, we'll learn to live in the moment and appreciate small victories. It would be great if you could develop a network of fellow patients that you can share with and learn from. These people become part of your support network, and maybe even new friendships will develop through them. And spiritual practices can really help you cope. Mary?
These are some rules that I developed for myself, and you'll probably want to develop your own rules. But these are my rules for living with chronic illness, and I know at least one of them, number 3, I think I read in a book by P.J. Hayback, who worked with the Vestibular Disorders Association a long time ago. She was a nurse, so I have to thank her. But my first rule is to cultivate a good sense of humor. And it's just not laughing at jokes or making a joke, but using humor as your boat to sail through life. I think that if you look at it, there's things about our illnesses that are funny. Okay, they're tragic, but they're kind of funny too. On the Vestibular Disorders Support website on Facebook group, there's a Vestibular Disorders support Facebook group, sorry, having Meniere's moment. You can make wonderful and meaningful relationships with people all over the world. And one of the people on this group mentioned one day recently that every time she sneezed, her ears plugged up and then she fell down. So you could look at that as tragic, like, for goodness sake, if she thinks she might sneeze, she better find a safe place to fall down. But she was laughing about it. For me, when I first lost my hearing because of where a Meniere's patient's hearing loss is, I thought people were talking about bombs when they were talking about moms. These are 4-year-old children. And I also was in a meeting once where I thought people were talking about Jews when they were talking about dues. And I live in a very diverse community, and this was quite puzzling to me. So, keep your mouth shut if you misunderstand something, but laugh at yourself when you do something funny. The second thing is the other thing that was hardest for me. Learn to ask for and accept help. I used to be the kind of person that would put 3 children under 4 in the car and drive to the grocery store to buy sugar rather than walk across the street and ask my friend for a cup of sugar. I have changed over the years, and I've learned to ask for and accept help. Sometimes you start asking and you say, oh, no, that's okay, I can do it myself. No, ask for help when you need it, so you have energy to do things you enjoy later in the day. do not mourn for your former self. So do not dwell in the fact that I used to be able to do this. I used to be able to remember things. I used to be able to take long walks. I used to be able to spend the whole day at the art museum. It's not great for you to it's not healthy for you to stay there. So look for new things you can do. Find whatever joy you can and dwell on that. And the last one might seem a little contradictory, but don't dismiss your illness, because if you pretend you're not sick, you're going to hit bottom fast. But don't dwell on it. So again, you don't live in it. Anne?
Yeah, I'm going to talk about humor for a minute. It's good to find humor in your situation when you can, but you can also kind of read books, watch movies that help you laugh. Laughter is very good for us for our health. It can improve our mental status, and it can help us even physically. And I don't know if you can tell, but I love to read research studies, and they found these factors, that laughter actually lowers your blood pressure. It actually reduces stress hormone levels. It can improve cardiac health. It can boost immune functioning, and it triggers the release of endorphins, which are our body's natural painkillers. It works our abdominal muscles when we give a hearty laugh, and it promotes a general sense of well-being. And I know of one researcher who found that laughter actually boosts better sleeping, which we all need for better health. So try to deliberately incorporate some comedy and humor into your routine.
And adding to Anne's comments, I forgot to mention, there's also there are also many laughing yoga groups in various towns, and in Chicago you see them downtown in Grant Park, and a lot of people are from the East Asia. And so what you see is people gather and somebody just starts laughing and somebody else starts laughing, and pretty soon there's like 300 people in Grant Park laughing. So, you know, I don't know what would happen to me if I went, but it certainly looks really healthy.
Great.
You can tell that I'm really dwelling on how hard it is to ask for help. So the thing to know is that asking for help does not mean you are weak. It actually means that you're strong enough to acknowledge your shortcomings. And not shortcomings, excuse me, your needs. Genuine friends genuinely want to help. Probably you've helped a lot of people in your life. But accepting help is an act of generosity. It's letting someone who really wants to do something for you. So if you can look at it a different way, you're doing something really nice for someone if you're letting them bring you dinner or drive you somewhere. Also, to be specific about what you need. Anne mentioned it. A good example for me, I learned a lesson from my nephew, Matt. He was only 19 or 20 years old. And we were our family has 5 siblings, and we alternate Christmas at different people's houses. So we were up at Matt's house in Milwaukee for Christmas. And when I walked in the door, I was dismayed to find that his dad, my brother-in-law, had bought a giant new TV the size of like maybe a football field, and had put in surround sound speakers all around, which worked on the television and the music, which my brother-in-law really likes music, and he likes to have it on all the time. So I was very sick at that point in my illness, and I was sick the second I walked in. And I said to my mom, boy, this is really making me sick. And my mom looked at me, and my mom's wonderful. But she said, well, maybe you could go in another room. And I thought, well, that's great. Here we drive to Milwaukee for Christmas, and there's 30 people in the room, and I'm supposed to sit in the living room by myself. So that made me sad. And my nephew came over and he said, what's wrong? And I said, well, your dad's music is making me violently ill. And he said, well, don't get mad. Ask for help. I thought, duh. He's way smarter than I am. So you get wisdom from everywhere, but just remember, be concrete and ask for help. We've already said if somebody offers their help, learn to receive it. It's a gift. Sometimes asking for help simply means asking for the space to be with your illness and to have freedom from other obligations. So some of us are wired to always be the guy who, helps the neighbor bail out their basement or fix their car, or the person that's always baking cookies for the bake sale or bringing coffee cake to the neighbors. If we can't do that anymore, it's okay. Do something else. Give them a phone call. Anne?
Yes, and this whole process of living with chronic illness, we'll expand a bit more on this idea of not mourning for our former selves. Because when we do that, we are stuck in neutral and we can't do anything new. If we habitually ruminate over our earlier life, we'll be living with feelings of anger, guilt, resentment, sorrow, or shame. And dwelling on the past can be a way of not coming to grips with things we need to pay attention in the present day. And we're robbing ourselves of opportunities by hanging on to that grief. And I'm not saying that's easy. I've been there myself. It's not. There's an ancient Chinese saying, though, that says, when I let go of what I am, I become what I might be. And we read that in the Bible also. Jesus said, he who loses his life will find it. I think that's very applicable in this kind of situation when we want some hope for good things that are coming in the future despite our limitations. Mary?
Don't dismiss, but don't dwell on your illness. So we need to acknowledge our illnesses. We need to talk about them when we need to, but not constantly. And we need to accept our new normal. And as I said before, with chronic illness, sometimes your new normal keeps sliding downhill. So you have to readjust. We have needs and limitations, and we need to own them. And that doesn't mean be proud of them, it just means accept them. They're part of us now. This is who we are, and okay. We can find lots of other wonderful things about ourselves. We're still us. Remember, you are enough. You are still a person. You're still you. Your family can see you're still you. Just remember that. Your illness doesn't own you. Move on. And that might seem like a little too buck up, bucko, but really your illness doesn't own you, even on the days you feel like it does. So we all have to keep building that new journey for ourselves and taking baby steps along it until we can find a way to live our lives in happiness. Anne?
And Mary, this is Cynthia. I just wanted to add, if I could, I wanted to share that this picture in this slide is of my mother, who has Meniere's disease. And I love this picture with this slide because to me it kind of represents my mother accepting her new normal. I've seen my mother's had Meniere's disease for over 30 years, and I've seen her go from a very active and gregarious person to a pretty she doesn't get out much. She when her balance first started going, she had to use a cane, and that was really hard because she didn't want to look old. We all have that feeling as we age, but she needed it. She knew she needed it. And at some point, as she started falling more frequently, we convinced her that she really needed a walker. And of course that she didn't really want at all, because that really makes you feel old. But it gave her a new freedom to actually get out to beautiful places, like in this picture. And we didn't walk far that day, but she got out. She accepted her new normal, and realized a freedom through that acceptance, and also by learning what her limitations are, and going out and saying, yes, I can do this. And then at some point she said, you know what, I need to turn around. And we did. So I just want to encourage you again, don't dismiss, as this slide says, what's going on for you, but don't dwell on it, and you can find ways to enjoy your life. Anne, back to you.
Okay. Well, I'm a counselor, and as counselors, like to say, we want you to learn how to reframe your thoughts. Well, our thought processes are kind of set patterns in our head, so it takes practice. But we want to get out of the downward spiral of negative thoughts that could keep us trapped. So you can reframe thoughts like, I'm never going to get better, by telling yourself, I'm taking one life one day at a time. The reason we'd like you to reframe your thoughts is because we're all talking to ourselves all the time. And what you say to yourself matters a great deal. So it can help to say that aloud to yourself in a mirror. It can help to journal those kind of things, to write positive thoughts and practice some of the positive spirituality to counteract the natural feelings of depression anyone would have dealing with a chronic illness. Mary, back to you.
We've got a poll we want to ask everyone, and I just launched it. Hopefully you can all see it. We want to kind of get a sense before we go any further about how you would describe your spiritual life today. You know, how active are you in spiritual practice? And keep in mind that this can be any kind of spiritual practice, not necessarily, a religious practice. It doesn't mean that you go to church every week or synagogue or any other type of formal group gathering. You might meditate individually at home, or maybe your spiritual practice is getting out in nature and being aware of how nature makes you feel connected with life. So I just want to make sure you're keeping that really open. And all right, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll and share everybody's responses. About 29% of people said that they have an active spiritual practice. 29% said inactive, which is really interesting. Another 29% said that their spiritual practice is missing some elements, and 14% said they're interested in expanding their spirituality. So thank you, everybody, for sharing. And I'll pass it off now to Mary.
Obviously, spirituality is not religion. They're two separate things. And Cynthia really explained a lot of that. So this is one way to think about it. Religion refers to the external expression of faith or the inner beliefs and values that relate to God or higher being. Usually, when we think of religion, we think of affiliation with a certain religion, whether it's Judaism or Presbyterianism, Buddhism, whatever ism. That's how we think of religion, where you follow certain practices and do certain things, go to certain places. And that's not what we're trying to say today, that you absolutely must belong to some religious group. But we are saying that spirituality, which might include religion, is the quality of being connected. Spirituality is the quality of being concerned with the human spirit or soul as opposed to the material or physical things. So obviously you can be spiritual without being religious. I would say that this is one of the great gifts of chronic illness for me, that I have developed much deeper spirituality, and I found things that I never thought were interesting before. So I've certainly been actively interested in meditating and have been doing meditation, which is pretty simple. It's really just being quiet. I'm interested in ancient Chinese sayings and philosophies, such as the one that Anne posted. And I'm also, to my own shock and amazement, finding myself interested in the medieval mystics, both Christian and especially Sufi Muslim. So when I was younger, the mystics kind of gave me the heebie-jeebies. And many people who were mystics, especially in the Christian department, seem to have had migraine or illnesses kind of similar to ours. So And so they were dismissed. You know, well, who cares about St. Catherine? She was hit migrants and she was probably kind of crazy. And now I think of it as, well, St. Catherine probably was given a great spiritual gift because of the suffering she had with her migraines. So you can find your own spiritual path if you wish, and I do think it's a big help. I still go to church every Sunday, but a lot of the spirituality I've developed is, it's not necessarily church related, but Buddhism, for instance, might help me appreciate my own Christian beliefs. And
So we have another poll that I just launched to get a little bit more information about if you've tried spiritual practices or not. So, and you know, it's pretty simple, just yes, no, or not sure. So I'll leave it open for just another minute and give everybody a chance to participate. And interestingly, so we've got, so far we have 7. Oh, it's changing. I'm going to wait just another minute. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. Looks like everyone's had a chance to participate. 60% of people who are on our webinar today have said that yes, they have tried a spiritual practice. 10% said no, and 30% said they're not sure. And hopefully we can, you know, by the end of this presentation, you'll have more of an idea of, you know, different types of spiritual practices that you might like to explore. So I'll pass it back to Anne.
Well, besides attending a religious service somewhere, the spiritual practices that anyone could do anywhere and belong to many traditions are on this slide. And it's not the only ones, but you might be surprised at the variety. Mary's going to talk about gratitude in a minute. We also have solicitude, caring for others. Research has even shown that that is very helpful when we go out and do something with a ministry of some sort. It takes our mind off our own problems for a while, and we get a natural boost from helping others. Simplicity is also a ancient spiritual practice, which is meant to set us free from stuff and to keep our focus on what's really essential. And perhaps that means more time spent with family and less time spent with secondary concerns. And I'm looking at the slide and it looks like I skipped a few things. We're going to talk more in depth about forgiveness, meditation, and prayer in future slides. Sacred reading is, again, a way in many religious traditions of turning our focus away from our personal concerns to consider the divine. We can even do that by reading poetry and just finding beauty in novels. It takes us away from our problems. It takes our mind off us. It expands our thinking in hopefully a positive way. Humility is another ancient practice, and there's a lot of current research going on about this practice today. And basically, it's, you know, when we accept our limitations and are realistic, we can work on some areas maybe that could stand some growth in our own development. Humility is associated with lots of positive emotions, and there's a whole bunch of writings about humility in leadership practices, which might seem the opposite of what we would expect. But you know, you think of those old monks doing humble service, but and in their monastery, or just gardening or serving the townspeople in the multitude of ways that they did. It teaches us something, and sometimes our illness puts us in a place of having to be humble, but we can learn to embrace that. Another spiritual practice is accepting ourselves and accepting other people. Illness can alter our perception of ourselves and sometimes make us more empathetic. And one of the human desires, the great desires of the human heart, is to be accepted for who we are. And so as we learn to accept ourselves, we can practice accepting other people and even our health conditions. This is a wonderful way of extending grace to other people, and it's often a major goal in counseling too. Thankfulness goes along with gratitude, and it brings you to the place where the beloved lives. So again, religious and spiritual practices have really been researched heavily in the last 15, 20 years, and there's quite a bit of data showing how much it promotes not only your mental health, but your physical health. I have a chronic autoimmune disease, and I can tell you when I'm under stress and upset, I have more symptoms, and I'm sure that happens with vestibular problems. It did with my husband. So the calmer and more peaceful we are is just one way that's going to benefit our physical health. Well, back to you, Mary.
Gratitude. Anne began speaking on this. It's impossible for me to overstate how much a gratitude practice has helped me in the last 20 years. I think it's the single most helpful thing I've done. And it's obviously helped me reach into many other areas of spiritual practice. Last year, Anne and I both had very bad years last year. So last year, every month, our family, my husband and my siblings, and our children and their children experienced either tragedy or very serious medical illness. It got to be almost funny, like there are 2 a month, some months. But it was very hard. And gratitude is the thing that let me stay strong and help my family during last year. And I think Anne talked about reframing, and she talked about her mom using a cane. And I think that comes in for me to gratitude too. So when I was diagnosed as a young mom, well, not young, but youngish mom, I still had 4 children at home. And I realized that I would need a cane and a hearing aid soon. I was really sad for a couple of days. And then I realized, be grateful that there's canes. Be grateful that there's hearing aids. I've always been grateful there's glasses. My vision's terrible. So be grateful for these things that help you live a normal life, keep up with other people, hear the world around you and your friends. So that's really helped me. I have kept a gratitude journal. Some days I fall off, but I often start with somebody that's very important to me or something small that happened. Friends of mine have been very generous, but even just seeing a flower outside is something you can be very grateful for. So I think if you look for things to find gratitude for, you'll find those things. I'm really lucky. I have a house, I have enough food to eat, and I have health care. Not everybody has those things. So I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for the many opportunities I have living in the community in which I live. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. This one's mine too. So forgiveness can be hard for some of us. Letting go of grudges and bitterness can make way for happiness, health, and peace. Ann Landers, that famous spiritual leader, once said that holding a grudge is like letting someone you really don't like live in your brain all the time. And I think that's a good way of thinking of it. Forgiveness is for the well-being of the person doing the forgiving, not for the offender. In other words, when you let go of anger, grudges, you feel better. We don't care what the person did. They might have done something unforgivable. We forgive them anyway. The best person that I can think of as an example of that is the Dalai Lama. As many of you would know, the Dalai Lama lived in Tibet. His country was a very peaceful country with not much of an army. The Chinese invaded them. Many people were killed. Many more people were forced to leave Tibet. And the Dalai Lama lost his home, the center for his religious leadership and practice, and was forced into exile. When reporters asked him, Dalai, how can you possibly forgive the Chinese for all the terrible, terrible things they've done to you and your people? He simply says, I forgive them because it makes me feel better. What a beautiful and simple thing to say. Forgiveness can lead to healthier relationships, greater spiritual and psychological well-being, less anxiety, stress, and hostility, lower blood pressure, fewer symptoms of depression, stronger immune system, improved heart health, higher self-esteem. And
our next topic is on meditation. And we probably think of that as an Eastern religious practice, but there's also a Christian or Western type meditation also. A more Eastern practice would be focusing inward, while a Western form is generally, not always, focusing outward upon the God of your understanding. So there's many, you can meditate on a sacred reading, you can do contemplative prayer and just sit in silence, contemplating the God of your understanding, or the sacred reading you're considering. But guess what? They've done a lot of studies on meditation as well, and shown that even people who meditate a lot, I believe it was a study on Buddhist monks, their brains were structured and functioned differently because of this continued practice of meditation. It does reduce stress, it improves concentration, it encourages a healthy lifestyle, increases self-awareness, happiness, and acceptance. It actually slows aging. I think I need to practice that one more. And it benefits cardiovascular and immune health. So whatever your religious bent is, consider incorporating some form of, we like to call it quiet time on the Christian side of things, but a meditative practice to calm you and give you a good start or maybe an end to your day. Mary?
prayer. People pray in many different ways. Sometimes people just may sit on the ground, close their eyes, and feel themselves in touch with the earth. That can be a form of prayer. Some people sit or walk in nature, and that can be a form of prayer. Some people pray to a personal God for specific goals, such as the healing of a child or spouse. Others might pray to God or to a spirit or to light for strength for themselves or vision for themselves as they go through challenging times. All the people I know, who are many, who have had serious illness, do say that when people pray for them, they can feel the energy of the hundreds and thousands of people that are praying for them. One young woman, a teenager, there was some kind of prayer chain. People from all over the world were praying for her. And she and her family certainly felt strengthened by that. In terms of what prayer might help do for us, whatever kind of prayer we discover, research suggests that prayer may be very beneficial. Prayer can improve self-control. Prayer makes you kinder. Prayer makes you more forgiving. Prayer increases trust. Prayer offsets the negative effects of stress. So these are all research-based.
So thank you, Marian and Anne. And we have several more slides, but at this point, we kind of want to get an idea of what kinds of spiritual practices you might have might have tried. And so this is multiple choice. I mean, you can choose all that apply to you. We've got journaling, meditating, yoga, tai chi, similar exercises, prayer, practicing gratitude, I'll leave it open, the poll open, just for a few more seconds to let everyone have a chance to click every option that they may have tried. And I think that this is what I'm seeing so far in the results is that, you know, there's no one spiritual practice. People incorporate lots of different kinds of spiritual practices in their lives. And I think that that says a lot about how important these spiritual practices are to our lives, whether or not you have a chronic illness, but especially when you're faced with really challenging things in your life, and you need the additional support. So I'm going to close the poll. We have 67% of our attendees said that they've journaled. 67% said they've meditated, which is great. 50% said they've tried yoga or tai chi. 67% also use prayer, and 75% practice gratitude. Thank you, everybody, for participating.
A faithful friend is sure shelter. Whoever finds one has found a rare treasure. A faithful friend is something beyond price, and there's no measuring his worth. That's from Ecclesiasticus 6:5-6. Friendships are really important. We need relationships. Not everyone's going to understand the journey that your illness is taking you on, but they don't need to do that. It's not for them. But you do need to seek out people who understand it. There are some support groups that you might find. It's great if you can find an in-person support group, but sometimes people with vestibular illnesses have problems getting out. So there's online groups. Avita has an online member forum designed for those with balance disorders and their loved ones. They also have VPALs, a pen pal network that you can connect with. And they also had a group started, I don't know if it's still going, for spouses of people with vestibular disorders, because sometimes we need support as well. But I know the Facebook support group is very active. There's a great deal of research, of course, that I'm going to mention that again, but they talk about the importance of social engagement and social support to our mental health. It is really critical. Remember that in prison, they put people in solitary confinement as a punishment. So we don't want to do that. We don't want to end up isolated just because we're dealing with a chronic illness. And an online support group is an easy way to make those connections, because faithful friends really are life-saving medicine. Mary, I guess you're doing the next one.
Is that right, Ann? I thought you were doing exercise.
Okay. Well, exercise is important, and we did already mention yoga and Tai Chi. Some people find chronic health problems, especially a balanced one, might limit their movement. You're not going to be maybe doing so much aerobic exercises, but exercises is great for mental health and our physical health, of course. And it can increase our awareness of the spiritual dimension we have within ourselves. And there's gentle ways of doing exercise. My husband had to do some of these because he couldn't, of course, he's not going to be running with his balance disorder or doing too many aerobic type exercises. So many people find benefit in yoga because you can do that sitting or lying down. You can do Tai Chi for balance. Simply walking is good for your body, and it gets energy because your blood's circulating, getting more blood to your brain. Having a recumbent bicycle in the house can be helpful and not too strenuous. And again, you're in a seated position. My husband did the recumbent bike, and he used resistance bands, which are those stretchy plastic bands you can get from your physical therapist, to exercise his legs and arms because he wasn't as active as he used to be. And the stronger your legs are, that helps with balance. So recumbent bike and the resistance bands can be really helpful. He also went to vestibular rehabilitation therapy, which really, really, really helped him. So I would highly recommend that to ask your doctor about that possibility. And I'm sure Mary will have a comment about those. Back to you, Mary.
This is Cynthia. I just wanted to add my own personal experience. I do have a personal yoga routine that I do every morning, and I find that it just, starting my day with that just puts me in a different frame of mind. I usually I am kind of I'm a doer. When I get up in the morning, even before I get out of bed, I'm thinking of all the things that I have to do. But taking that hour in the morning to do yoga where I don't have to think about anything, I'm focused on my body. There is something about that is really focusing and healing, and it helps me get my day started. And I also just wanted to add that I talk to a lot of vestibular physical therapists, and across the board, they all say walking is one of the best things you can do to help improve your balance. And I will also encourage you to do it safely. If you have balance issues, please use walking supportive devices. I know a lot of people with balance problems who will use walking poles, urban walking poles, to help them. It's a great form of exercise. It's becoming much more common, so you don't look like you're, it's not as unusual as it used to be. I'll just say that. Okay, I'll pass this on to Mary now.
Sad days. So even though we're saying, all of us are saying, we really can't dwell on our illnesses, it's okay to accept that some days you won't feel great. And some days you'll feel sad and depressed. So if you have one of those days where you sort of feel like you're hitting bottom and you feel really sad for yourself and you want to have a pity party with yourself or your best friend, it's okay. Be gentle with yourself. Allow yourself to grieve what you have lost, past, present, and future. It can be easy to get wrapped up in these emotions, so it's important to find a way to move on. So my rule for myself, things you can do. Read inspirational sayings. Some people like those, some people don't. Before I had Meniere's, I didn't. Once I had Meniere's, I did. Journal about things you are grateful for. Remember the people in your life who love and support you. They still do. Meditate on, look at beautiful things in nature or great works of art. If you have any art books in your house that you haven't looked at in a while, you probably got them because they made you happy. Have one out on the coffee table or near your chair or bed, and you'll be able to look at those. And the other thing that I do is, if I feel sorry for myself and I'm really down for more than a day or two, I go back to my rules, the ones that I developed, which are cultivate a good sense of humor, use humor as your boat to sail through life, learn to ask for and accept help, do not mourn for your former self, do not dismiss your illness, do not dwell on it. So I think we all have to find our own rules, but those have really helped me. Anne?
Okay, well, spirituality can sometimes be the missing link in completing a patient's healing journey. You may have noticed a lot of scenery in our slides. I do, and many people do, find just being outside and connecting with nature enhances their feelings of spirituality and their connection and sense of peace. Mary's mentioned art, and of course, music is a great way to enhance your sense of well-being. And, I like blues, but sometimes, in fact, I love blues. Sometimes that can take me down a little bit. So pay attention to what you listen to and what you watch. So that sometimes you put the funny, you put the uplifting in there and not listen to negative things too much. And as you can see from our list of spiritual practices, many, many things could be included that we didn't even mention. But it is a critical part of life. I am a licensed counselor, and we screen for spirituality, sort of a generic one, but we ask about hobbies and relationships and general religious affiliations because we know they're part of making life full. And one last research study has actually found that people actively engaged with religious beliefs live longer, from 7 to 14 years, depending on affiliations and cultural things. But living an extra 7 years is worth exploring your spirituality, right? If we're living it in a healthy way. So look through some of the resources we're going to include at the end of the webinar to read those for yourself. But I hope that this information we provided is helpful and encouraging to you, and I pray that you find some blessings in your journey with chronic illness. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anne, and thank you, Mary, so much for spending so much time considering this topic and presenting it and sharing some very close and intimate personal things about your spiritual practice. And I hope that this has been beneficial for those of you who are attending. I see a question from Linda about where are the handouts. In your menu, there should be in my menu, it's right under the questions bar. There should be a little bar that says handouts, and you might need to click on the little triangle that is next to it to open that drop-down menu so that you can view those and download those. I'm opening this up where we kind of used up a lot of our time, but I would like to say if anybody has any questions, feel free to type them into the questions box, and if we don't get to answer them now, we can certainly address them with an email later on. So thank you everybody again for attending. I hope this was beneficial to you. Thank you so much to Anne and Mary, and have a wonderful, peaceful day.